Good morning, everyone. Easter's probably the only holiday that you could make a strong case for being sanctioned by the New Testament, because it's one of the only ones where we know the time of year, even down to the day when it's supposed to take place. Now, that being said, we typically don't actually celebrate it on the day it's supposed to be celebrated, which would be the Sunday after Passover, and there's a whole lot of church history that goes into that, and we could do that some other time. But my main focus for today would be to just wish you all a happy Easter and spend some time talking about Jesus' resurrection. Of course, we do that a little bit every Sunday when we have our communion together. But today especially, I'd like to take an opportunity to look at one of the people who was a witness to the resurrection and talk about how her experience actually helped to form the church as we know it, and make a case for maybe giving her a particular role, or pointing out a role rather, that the Gospels give her that might help us to understand how we're supposed to see this person. So we'll start, first of all, who are you talking about, Ethan? Who is our character for today? If you go to Luke chapter 8, we'll be introduced to her right at the beginning of this chapter. Now, this chapter is probably most famous in Luke chapter 8 for being about one of Jesus' most famous parables, the parable of the sower. If you've ever had somebody preach to you about the good and the bad soils and where the seeds fall and the birds eating the seeds, all that stuff, you've read this one before. But what they will often skip over, or at least not put a lot of emphasis on, are the things that happen before and after these two parables at the beginning of Luke chapter 8. The first part is this introduction to the sort of traveling party that Jesus has with him. Now, we take the 12 apostles for granted, right? And some of the other disciples we know had spent time with Jesus from the beginning of his ministry. This is how good old Matthias gets picked when they're replacing Judas. They said, well, we've got to pick one of the guys who's been with us all along but wasn't one of the apostles. And they vote, and then they have to cast lots and pick Matthias, right? So we knew there were other people besides the 12 who were already there. They just don't cast them in the movies because they don't want to hire too many actors. It gets expensive. No, I'm joking. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there was a whole group of people that were there supporting Jesus in various ways. And our character for today is among them. Chapter 8, verse 1 says the following. After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household. Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. So Mary Magdalene is the person I'll be talking about today, and we'll be spending our time to focus on in the lesson. And I thought it would be worth just first trying to answer this question, who is Mary Magdalene? Well, first of all, she was someone from whom Jesus had cast out many demons, 7 demons specifically. She was not only a witness to Jesus' miracles, but was a recipient of one of Jesus' miracles, right? She benefited from one of Jesus' miracles. Additionally to that, she is given this very interesting and special role that I don't know if I had noticed before doing the study for this lesson, and maybe you hadn't either. Did you notice why it was that they were following with Jesus and what they were doing as they followed along with Jesus? The end of that last verse, the 3rd verse, told us that these women were helping to support them, that is, the apostles and Jesus, out of their own means. So Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna, among others, many others it specifically says, were the sponsors for Jesus' ministry. They were going around and giving material support to the efforts of Jesus' ministry. Now, if you ever imagined Jesus' ministry looking like 13 guys wandering around in the desert, stumbling across towns and preaching, I wouldn't blame you. Because like I said, somewhat jokingly earlier about movies, a lot of the fictional depictions we see just kind of look like that. There's just the important characters, just the guys, and they show up and they do their preaching stuff and then they stumble off to the next town. But if you think about it, it really makes sense that there would be not only other followers who just simply want to hear what Jesus has to say, they're just following him around like they want to be at the next venue when he has another sermon, just like somebody might follow a band on a concert tour. And they're eager to find out what Jesus is doing. But also, we have to know that the money to do this operation, or the means to do this operation of taking care of Jesus and 12 other guys, and assuming several other people beyond that, had to get some sort of resources from somewhere. And we know that at least the names of at least 3 of the people who were doing that work. So Mary has some means of her own, and she is a person who follows Jesus to give him support and to sponsor his earthly ministry. Moreover, after these parables, the parable of the sower, where Jesus talks about how the word implanted in people's hearts can grow and mature and become something fruitful, and talking about the church as a lamp on a stand that can't be hidden, but rather is brought out into the open, he then gives the following statement in verse 19 of the same chapter. This is Luke 8:19. Now Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him, but they were not able to get near him because of the crowd. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside, waiting to see you," or wanting to see you, rather. He replied, "My mother and my brothers are those who hear God's word and put it into practice." And so we can see that Mary Magdalene, by this criteria Jesus gives here, is among the real family of Jesus. She's one of the people who is doing what he says and not just showing up when he's preaching and saying, "Can't you come back home? You're embarrassing us. Why are you doing all of this stuff? Wandering around with this group of people, preaching. Don't you know we've got carpentry to do?" And so we'll look at another passage now from Luke chapter 24. We've gone from the middle of Jesus' ministry to the end and this prologue that is the resurrection, the main focus of our lesson for today. It's no surprise that Mary Magdalene is here in this chapter, and in fact, this may be the chapter from which, in this episode in the Gospels, from which you are most familiar with her. She's one of the women who goes and takes care of Jesus' body after his burial, or at least attempts to, and finds there is no body there, in fact, to take care of. And we'll get to that in just a second. But the main point we want to make here is, even after Jesus' crucifixion, she's still among those people who are providing material support to Jesus, right? That she went and got these spices, and they were going to go do the work of embalming the body, and it's no small task to do. I don't work at a funeral home, and I don't think I'd have the stomach to, but if you know anybody who does or anything about the business, it's not a simple thing to take care of a body and to prepare it for burial. And what they were doing was very hands-on. They didn't have sort of the modern equipment and sanitation sort of practices that we might have today. And so in some ways, this is not only a very intimate and a personal thing to do for Jesus, but it's also an expensive and a labor-intensive process to go and take care of this body. And so her commitment to Jesus and his ministry is very evident in this episode of Jesus' story as well. Let's read a little bit, starting in just the first verse here. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices that they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. When they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again?" Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who had told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. From this point on, Jesus, in his resurrected body, will go back and visit the apostles, and the story will continue from there. But I want to spend some time here on this moment of resurrection. We're going to look at the other Gospels in just a moment, at least one other Gospel, to include some other details from the story. But even from what we can see here, there's something important that's going on. Did you notice that these women who, and specifically Mary, who fill this special role in Jesus' life, are now doing an interesting and an important task that is universal to all Christians going forward? They go and tell their story about the resurrected Jesus and spread the message that Jesus came back from the dead. Their job is not just to take care of Jesus' body, but to be witnesses to what they had been anticipating all along. You know, starting from the beginning of Jesus' ministry, they were looking for a Messiah. They were looking for the resurrection to happen. And then they began to understand that Jesus was in that role, he was the Messiah, and that the resurrection would happen on his account. But they weren't anticipating fully, really understanding fully, that he would be the first to benefit from the resurrection, right? That's why they're surprised when they find the empty tomb. But now, the job that they have been given is to go back and spread the message, Jesus has risen from the dead. Now, what's the initial response? Well, I don't believe you. I'm going to go check for myself. There's something in that we're going to look at a little bit further as we go on. But just keep that message in mind as we look at another account from Matthew in chapter 28. Because we saw the events of what took place in Luke's account. But Luke doesn't really record the emotion that was attached to it, and that's important in this case. Not just what was happening, but how did they feel about it? How should we feel about it as we encounter this episode in Jesus' life and we think about their experiences in that day? So in this morning, on Sunday morning, Jesus has risen from the dead, and they're about to discover this all over again for our benefit in chapter 28 of Matthew, just starting at the first verse. So Matthew 28, verse 1 says the following. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Now we're going to look at something else in just a moment. We're going to continue, but I want to pause on that phrase. When they see the original moment of witness, when they see the angel, they see the empty tomb, what are the two feelings that they experience in that moment? after they've got this message. Fear and joy. Now, normally, you don't think of those two things going together, right? They're almost opposites. The fear of maybe seeing the angel. I mean, the angel was so scary that he knocked two grown men to the ground, and they shook and laid there like they were dead. But the fear also comes from this moment that has taken place. It would certainly be disturbing to show up and want to do the job of embalming your friend's body, maybe the most important person in your life, this great teacher, Jesus, and not fight it. And then you see this angel, but who in the moment could believe that this actually even happened? It would be so shocking. So, go quickly and tell his disciples he has risen from the dead. So they get this message. They turn to hurry away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy. The message was joyful. The situation was fearful. And that contradiction is probably the most human reaction you could have to this moment. But then something else happens. Verse 9. Suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. And so they go, and they make their report to the disciples. The passages from Luke will elucidate some of the facts about this situation, and then Matthew has really helped us now to really understand these emotions that they were feeling in the moment. And then we see Jesus' message on top of that. You know, the angel told them, do not be afraid. And what was their response? They were afraid, right? But I can't help but feel that after they heard Jesus say, don't be afraid, their emotions were probably quite different. If we're trying to take away a lesson and an example from Mary today, if we're trying to look at this and say, who is Mary Magdalene and why should we as Christians try to imitate her story as a believer? There's some things we may not be able to relate to. First of all, I don't think there's a single one of us who's had 7 demons cast out. If you have, congratulations. And there's none of us who've been privileged enough to follow the Lord on his ministry. None of you are that old. Some of us are pretty old, but none of us are that old. Jokes aside, though, some of the parts of her experience, some of the parts of her witnessing are important. But more important than just what she saw, what she was present for, was what she did with that information. What did she do with her eyewitness testimony? What did she do with her experiences? She shared them with others. Even though, especially we saw in the passage from Luke, they didn't necessarily believe her, she still shared them. And why is that important? Well, because the main point of this is not that we are to be, every single time, convincers who come out and didactically tell the person that we're witnessing to, here's what I believe and why you should believe it. I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm wiser. I've got the best words. I can say them in just the right order, and everybody knows what I mean, and they will be convinced. But instead, the point of witnessing is to make the other guy say, well, now I got to go check for myself. Because if you're Mary, then the person you're speaking to gets the role of Peter. Well, I've got to go see this empty tomb. I've got to run. I've got to duck in and check. If I'm Peter, I want to go and put my hand on it and see the spot where Jesus is no longer. Our testimony about the living God may not be convincing, It may not be the only thing that gets someone to go and search for Jesus. But our testimony about the resurrected Jesus may lead somebody to search for the empty tomb for themselves. Here's the important thing. If you are trying to witness for Jesus, if you're trying to explain your faith and why you believe what you believe, I need you to understand this very clearly and very sincerely this morning. Take this away if you take nothing else. Mary Magdalene teaches us that when we share our testimony with others, they do not need to believe you. You just need to give them a reason to look. They don't need to believe you. You just need to give them a reason to want to check for themselves. They don't need to believe you. They need to believe in Jesus. Pressure's off. All you've got to do is say what God's done for you. And in the meantime, we can follow her example in some other ways. She supported ministry by being present, by doing what needed to be done to get Jesus and the apostles from the beginning to the end of his ministry. She supported Jesus by standing with him, even at the cross. In the passages where she shows up in 13 times over 20 chapters. One of the times is standing at the cross and watching him as he suffered. She supported him by being there. So if you see Jesus working somewhere, be there. And I think the last thing we can take away from Mary Magdalene is even if people don't remember us or even know everything we've ever done, if we can leave a reputation behind, it should be for somebody who worked with Jesus. If you can be famous for nothing else, let people remember you were somebody who was on Jesus' side. If you're not on his side today and you haven't become a follower, we'd invite you to come forward and the waters of baptism will be prepared and we can do what we can to help you in that regard. If we can help you in any other way and give you prayers of support or encouragement, and we can restore you to your faith and help you come back to the church if you've wandered away, we'd invite you to come forward as we stand and sing.
$237.